Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute, and with me today is Mike Berry, Deputy General Counsel at First Liberty, and Chelsey Youman, Senior Counsel at First Liberty, and we were all in the Supreme Court courtroom for the argument this week, and just wanted to really share with you what we saw, what we're thinking. And so let me start with the basics, because not everybody knows what this case is about. This is a Veterans Memorial that was put up almost 100 years ago by mothers who lost their sons in World War I, as well as the American Legion. There's now a lawsuit against it to have it torn down by the American Humanist Association. We were able to win at the district court, but at the Court of Appeals, the decision was 2-1 that this memorial, after almost 100 years, is now supposedly unconstitutional. And that's important because not only what would happen to this memorial and the families that are represented by the 49 young men who died, who are listed on this memorial, but this would have an effect upon all veterans memorials. In fact, Arlington Memorial Cemetery is just a short drive away, and the large freestanding crosses there would have to be torn down, and they would literally have to come into every community of every state of this country and start a religious cleansing of our monuments and memorials across the nation. And so, very important case, one that people are watching, and a lot of issues in that. Let me start. I'm going to start with Mike. Why is this? You're a veteran, a Marine. Why is this something that veterans like the American Legion really care about?
Well, it's important for veterans to be able to remember and honor those who've gone before us, those who've paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. And memorials is one of the most visible ways, are one of the most visible ways that we do that. Just as you said, you can drive through almost any county or town or city across this country, and you'll see some type of memorial honoring the selfless service and sacrifice of our veterans. And the American Legion and other groups want to be able to continue doing that without these constant threats of lawsuits, not only for existing memorials, but for any future ones that could be put up. I mean, if there were some future war and a memorial were to be put up for those lost serving in that war, the American Legion and other groups want the ability to continue to honor and remember those sacrifices.
And Chelsey, you know, what a lot of people don't think about, I know, in this is, you know, that this is just about memorials, veterans memorials, but actually it could have wider implications. I mean, what other things are at risk when, you know, how does this case affect other cases depending upon what they do?
Well, I think it's important. We could even just narrow it down to this in the simplest terms, that opposing counsel and the people who want to remove the memorial essentially are saying that religion has no place in the public realm, that there should be no religious symbolism, that there should be no acknowledgement of God or any faith at all in the public realm, and that that's inappropriate. And of course, I think that's something that the justices, even in the middle of oral arguments, caught on to. Justice Alito said, do you want to take down every cross across our country? And even Justices Breyer and Justice Kagan, they said there's such a historical significance to this cross, especially for our World War I veterans, that even some of those justices who maybe wouldn't align with us normally could at least understand and see how important it is to be able to continue to honor our veterans, but also with the symbol of a cross.
Well, I think that's important. I mean, the concept that comes to my mind when you say that is if this were to go the wrong way, like below, it would be the beginning of a religious cleansing across the country. I mean, memorials, monuments, religious symbols across the country would all have targets on them, which I think would be unfathomable to most Americans. One of the things I know is, I want to make sure everybody understands, is the arguments. I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but what are we trying to do here, and why is this kind of thing even happening to a veterans memorial? Is this what the Constitution says, and how do we get into this predicament?
Well, it's important to start at the beginning, right? That when the Constitution was drafted, we understand the First Amendment has these two clauses: the Free Exercise Clause, which Congress shall not prohibit the free exercise of religion in this country, and there's also the Establishment Clause: Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. And so for 150, almost 200 years, that was what we understood, the First Amendment, at least with respect to religion in the public sphere. That's what we understood it to mean. simply that Congress will not make a law establishing a religion. And then in about 1971, you had this case called Lemon versus Kurtzman, which gave us what we now refer to as the Lemon Test. And the Lemon Test really just turned all of that on its head. And it flipped the whole thing upside down, where you began to have the ability for somebody to say, if I see something and it offends me personally and I don't like it and I think it's too religious, or I guess in the words of the lawyer for the American Humanist Association, even if it's just too loud, as she described it, then I can file a lawsuit. And the court will then look at that, and the Lemon Test no longer looks at the Establishment Clause as it's written in its text and whether or not Congress or the government is trying to coerce somebody or force them to do something against their religious beliefs. The Lemon Test simply says, is there a religious or a secular purpose for putting it there? What was the government's intent when they put a monument or memorial there? And then the kind of the third prong of Lemon is there excessive entanglement? I mean, whatever that even means, right? And so what that ends up doing is allowing an individual judge to use his own or her own subjective judgment to decide if they like it, then it's going to be okay. If they don't like it, it's not okay. And that's just, it's such an unworkable test. It's so impractical, and it creates a lot of confusion. It's really not fair to judges, to county officials. And what it ends up resulting in is, over the years, and we've seen this now since from 1971 to the present, really, because people are so, county, government officials and et cetera, are so afraid of violating this Lemon Test because they don't even know what it really means. They just know that some judge who doesn't like it is probably going to rule against them. What's the easiest thing to do? Their default is, let's not do anything at all. And that actually has the intended or unintended consequence of religious hostility, which was never what our framers and founders intended when they drafted the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think of, everybody thinks about monuments with this, but this is why Coach Kennedy got fired, is because of these bizarre interpretations that have nothing to do with the Constitution. It's the Lemon Test, and they're scared. So if they see religion, they think they shut it down, even if there's nothing wrong with religion or monuments or memorials. As you said, the founders did not want an established church. They didn't want there to be a Church of England, a Church of the United States, that then everybody was forced to support. But this Lemon Test has taken us in a whole new direction that it really created hostility to religion. So in this case, I would point out to people, there were sort of two things going on in the courtroom as we were watching. There was, are they going to tear down this memorial? And what would that mean? But the second argument going on was, if we rule in favor of the American Legion and in favor of this memorial, how do we rule? Do we get rid of this Lemon Test that's been such a problem? And if so, what is the new approach? And so just kind of, I guess, teeing that up, tell me what would you love to share with people, since you were in the courtroom, that they didn't get to see, that you thought was really important or interesting, or just something you'd love to share on it?
Right. I think it's incredible. I walked away with definitely two clear points of understanding that the justices were grappling with. The first being what Mike alluded to, which is the lower courts are in disarray over the Lemon Test. There's the facts and issues in the lower courts, it's convoluted area of law. The jurisprudence is a mess. Even Chief Justice Roberts at one point told opposing counsel, he said, if I get this case as a district court judge, I'm throwing up my hands not knowing what to do anymore, because our jurisprudence is essentially that confusing. And so the first would be that they understood that very clearly, which was incredible for us. But the other side was that they want to do something about it. And so a lot of the conversation and dialogue between Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh was this back and forth. Should we just buy into what our attorney Carvin was arguing, which is there should just be a clear standard. It's very simple, the coercion test. Is the government getting back to what our founding fathers envisioned the Establishment Clause being, which is the government coercing you to change your beliefs or practice your beliefs differently? And that's really rather simple. And I think that the justices really caught on to that.
Mike, what about you? You were in the courtroom. What did you see that stands out that, again, nobody else got to watch? And by the way, people can, if they want, they can go now and listen to the argument. They can actually read the transcript of the questions and answers and what happened. But again, assuming not everybody's going to do that, and there's even a difference when you're in that courtroom. What stood out to you that happened?
Well, obviously, Chief Justice Roberts' acknowledgement that if he were a lower court judge and he got this case, he said, I throw my hands in the air. I don't know what to do. I think that was an important moment in the case and the argument. A lot of people, you could almost feel everybody kind of pay closer attention. That people kind of perked up when they heard the Chief Justice say that, because that indicated that he understood the problem that Lemon presents. The other thing I observed was, and our co-counsel, our lead counsel in the case, Mike Carvin, who did a fantastic job, I thought he did a really good job of helping the justices understand that what the opposing side, the American Human Association, what they're really complaining about here is the fact that this particular memorial is in the shape of a cross. And so they said, okay, well, let's say we save this cross. The justices, let's say we rule in favor of the American Legion in this case, and this cross is saved. What about the other ones? And her point is really, yeah, the majority of them are a cross or some reference to God or religion, and so it's just too many crosses. And what Mike Carvin's point was, yeah, and so if all you do is save this cross, but you say, but no other ones, right? This one gets grandfathered in, but no other crosses or no other memorials or nothing else is going to be saved, then really what you're going to do is it's going to have this unintended consequence of discriminating against minority faiths. Because what happens in South Carolina or in Pittsburgh when the victims of those horrific tragedies at the synagogue in Pittsburgh, what if they want to put up a memorial to those who are lost in that tragedy, and they want to do it in the shape of a Star of David? Guess what? If all the court does is saves the Bladensburg Memorial, but doesn't issue a ruling that protects future memorials, then the people who want to put up a memorial to the victims of the synagogue shooting, they don't get to do that. And so all you end up doing is saying anything before 1925 and before it comes in under a grandfather clause, but nothing after that comes in. Well, the opposing counsel's own argument was, yeah, and the majority of them are like Christian crosses and stuff. So that you have this
protect all the Christian crosses,
yeah,
but all the future, including minority faiths,
right,
get discriminated against. It didn't make any sense to me that you would just lock something in time. I mean, we had the 9/11 memorial occur not too long ago. So we don't allow that now. We tear down the beams crossing. We go, oh, we can't allow that.
Much was made about the 9/11 cross that was found in the rubble, and I think her arguments really fell apart on that. I think my favorite moment was as she's discussing that any real recognition of religion in the public realm is unconstitutional. I looked up, and Justice Breyer actually looked up above his head for quite a minute and looked, because there's this massive marble engraving above the justice's head, and it's got a lot of symbols, and they all symbolize the justice that the Supreme Court serves and hears every single day. And sitting in the very center of that engraving are the Ten Commandments. And I think it was just this very clear visual picture above the justice's head as they're even talking about the recognition of religion and the important role that it could play and be allowed to flourish in our society. Above their head is the Christian symbol of justice.
Yeah, that was, and the justices brought that up even at one point. I think Gorsuch was Justice Gorsuch. The two things that stuck out to me was, number one, I think they realize lemon is a major problem, and they have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And if we accomplish that in this case, we have done something huge for the future of the country. And so, to me, that was just really a moment in history that we were in there watching, which I think could be something that we talk about for the next 40 years. The other thing was, I was thinking about how we're working on getting good judges and good justices on the court, and I looked up there, and watching Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, they were so incredible in the oral argument. Great questions, right on point. Couldn't have been prouder that they were justices on the United States Supreme Court. So all that kind of came together for me. Well, last thing I want to do before we close up here is tell me, coming out of the court, we come out of the court, you go down those steps of the Supreme Court, there's the cache of microphones, there's the press conferences, there's all this milling around that we did. Anything there that hit you that was really powerful that you'd want to share with everybody?
Yeah, I mean, my first impression, or just, you know, as I'm playing it over again in my mind's eye, walking down those steps, was just how many people there were. I mean, this was a you know, maybe not the most attended in history, but it was definitely a buzz with energy and people, and so that kind of really stood out. Is how much people really care about this case and what it stands for, and I noticed, you know, there were some veterans groups and others, and maybe there were probably even people who were on the other side, you know, who are supporting the American Humanist Association, I'm sure. But as I walked down the steps and went out towards the street there in front of the Supreme Court, I noticed a woman holding a picture in her arms. And it was a picture, it was, you know, unmistakable. This was a young Marine. It was his boot camp photo. He was in his dress blues. He had that just prototypical Marine face when you graduate boot camp, you know, of pride and of stern, just professionalism, and this young warrior, you know. But I also knew, because I saw at the bottom of the photo, it said that, you know, she identified herself as a Gold Star mom, and a Gold Star mom is somebody who has lost a family member in combat. And so, and then on her jacket, I noticed it was a Marine Corps emblem. And as a Marine, and I see that, and it sent a chill down my spine, and I couldn't help myself. I actually interrupted my conversation with somebody and said, "I'm sorry, I've got to go talk to this woman." And I went over to her and I said, "You know, are you a Marine mom?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "My son, this is his boot camp photo. He was killed in action in Afghanistan, and I personally served in Afghanistan. I lost members of my unit during my combat deployment in Afghanistan, so there was kind of this immediate connection." And I said, "You know, are you here because of the Supreme Court case?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "I heard about the Bladensburg case. I'm here to support the American Legion, and I hope that they don't tear that cross down." She said, "Because I know if they tear that cross down, they're going to come for Arlington Cemetery next." And she said, "That's where my son is buried." She said, and I can't imagine anybody coming after Arlington, where my son is buried now, and he's a hero. He died for this country and for our freedom." And it just, and she gave me a big hug, and just, I mean, we'd never met before. She had no idea who I was. And she just said, she asked me for my card and said if she could stay in touch, so when we get a decision in the case, if I'd let her know what it was. And I said, you know, of course, I'm happy to do that.
That's a great, just one example that's probably multiplied, you know, many, many, many times over, of people that really care that weren't there.
Right.
Anything for you, Chelsey, as you came out at the end? Anything you saw that?
I think it was just so evident to me what you were alluding to, which is so many people genuinely care about this, and they care about our nation's heritage, and they were there with their American Legion hats on and their uniforms, and just there to support this idea that we have to memorialize our heroes and the significance of that, and that we should be able to do that with religious symbols in a way that honors them. I think everybody really was able to have a clear understanding of that. And then, of course, there was a descendant. There are 49 men that are represented specifically on the Bladensburg Memorial, and one of their descendants was present in there, and it was just incredible to get to meet her. And this means, the cross means everything to her. She lives in the town. She sees it every day, and she just says, "We have to let it stand. They can't take my cross," is what she told me. That
was probably one of my biggest. I go up to lead the press conference with our team, with the American Legion, and with Mike Carvin, who argued the case, and as I go up, I see Mary McQuay, who's a descendant family, and I said, "Well, come with us." And she said, "Yeah, absolutely." And, you know, she's small, petite, and I mentioned her when I started the press conference with all the media, and Nina Totenberg of NPR is standing there, and after we finished, she said, "Why don't you say something?" She said to Mary, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't want to put Mary on the spot, but Mary, she had no problem. She went right up to those microphones, and she said what this would mean to her and how horrible it would be if they were to tear down this memorial as a descendant. This is her ancestor that's on this memorial. So that was a kind of a surprising moment to me. The other thing that I thought was really neat is when we went down to the bottom of the steps, all those American Legion members that were there, and I don't know if people have gone to the website and look. I'm sure we have plenty of pictures of this, but to me that was all the American Legion hats, and the Supreme Court right behind it was one of the most powerful images I had ever seen. I thought that said it all. So I would encourage people pray because while the court had the argument, they probably won't issue the decision until late June. And between now and then, they'll be writing, they'll be trying to convince people to jump sides. And this could really be a great thing for our country, not only for this memorial and all the veterans memorials, but if we get rid of the Lemon Test and get back to the Constitution, religious freedom is going to flourish in ways, and the hostility to religion by the government is going to stop. And that would be historic. So please be in prayer, and thank you for being a part of First Liberty.